The first Unity plan, Marshall, who will talk to you later on, was the prime mover behind that. In 2007, a group of folks got together to update and revise it, to look at some different alternatives and to consider different scenarios. So what I'm going to show you is what came out of that last session, a set of principles, guidelines. There are a lot of details that are not in here because there's no time to go through them. But 2007, in April, a group of about 80 people spent the whole day talking about different scenarios, coming up with alternative ideas, and we put together the, this was the Unity workshop, April 28th, 2007. We looked at 3 scenarios. I'm going to show you the first 2 because the third scenario, unfortunately, can no longer occur. The third scenario was that nothing would get built. But this was the Doomsday Scenario, the horror story, out-of-scale development, creating this barrier between the 2 neighborhoods, Fort Greene and Prospect Heights.
The Doomsday, it was the Forest City.
It was the Forest City plan, absolutely. Perhaps 20 years of construction noise. We had long discussions about this, anticipating that the promise that it would be done in 3 to 5 years was a lie. And as you can see, that's been borne out. At least 10 years before most of the affordable housing and open space are built, and now it's a question whether any of it's going to be built. Constant shadows, traffic nightmare, private open space. We looked at all of the environmental impact analysis and the details of the plan. Okay. The second scenario was, what if only the first phase were completed? And lo and behold, that's where we are right now. Sort of. It's the arena plus these 4 buildings. Now, even that has changed. The arena's under construction. Probably 1 other building, maybe 2, might follow. But beyond that, everything is up in the air, and all on this site. These numbers have changed. The numbers of housing units and square foot of retail and so forth, but those were the numbers at that time.
Yeah. The community room was also over there.
Right, the community room, which is really a fancy term for the lobby of the arena, was basically nixed, and the green roof, which originally was, I think, supposed to be painted green, and then they announced that nobody would have access to it. So even if it were real green, nobody would have access. Well, that's gone too. So we anticipated this situation, had some discussion about it, and this is similar to the previous slide you saw. Temporary surface parking. This was the Forest City Ratner plan. Temporary surface parking over here and over here, and we made the comparison. If you go down the block to the Hoyt-Skirmihorn urban renewal area from the 1960s, those vacant lots which were acquired to build affordable housing in the 1960s were vacant for nearly 40 years. So there's ample precedent all over New York City for this. Urban renewal areas, land was taken through the use of eminent domain with promises for affordable housing development. Yeah. So now I'm going to just run through the planning principles. connecting the neighborhoods, developing at a human scale and density, promoting diversity and vitality, create and preserve affordable housing, improve mass transit, jobs for Brooklyn residents, accessible public spaces, and an open planning process. In each one of these sections, there's a lot more detail. This is just the summary. I'm just going to go through a little bit of more detail on two of them. Affordable housing. We had a whole group that developed a detailed plan, much more detailed than we have here, that contrasted quite favorably with the Forest City-Ratner Affordable Housing Plan. So it would require a new community benefits agreement, 60% instead of they claim it was 50%. It was actually, when you come right down to it, 17%, 14% affordable to Brooklyn residents. This plan would be 60% affordable to Brooklyn residents. All units built on site, not often ground built. 40% of the units owner occupied, and making a guarantee of permanent affordability. And compared to the Forest City-Ratner affordability profile, these darker bars here are the lower income brackets. So the Unity plan, which is in gray, has a much higher proportion of the units going to people earning less than $70,000, to households earning less than $70,000. And this is all doable. A number of professionals from local nonprofit housing development groups took part in this discussion and fleshed out the numbers. Transportation was the other detail, which I think is particularly important now, talking about not the short-term measures that were laid out by Forest City-Ratner, which is really just a few traffic diversions. You're beginning to see them now, that really don't solve the fundamental problems, and which they admitted in their environmental impact analysis did not mitigate the significant negative environmental impacts. So we called for a comprehensive multimodal transportation plan. If they're going to call it transit-oriented development, then there has to be a plan to improve transit, to make the connections between train and bus, to connect the Long Island Railroad to Lower Manhattan, to improve surface transit in the neighborhoods and to downtown. So here's the transit part of the plan. Limit on-site parking. They call it transit-oriented development, but the original plan had 3,600 parking spaces. And still, the plan is to use the interim sites for parking. And if that's going to be parking for 30 years, that's a negative transportation impact. And so we propose congestion parking as one scheme, which is charging higher rates for parking during peak hours, enforcing parking rules, and so forth. Making the area walkable and bikeable, using traffic calming measures, more than the few that Forest City-Ratner had proposed for Atlantic Avenue. And a bicycle plan much more detailed than their proposal for 400 parking spaces. We had some discussion about the details of a bicycle plan, that it should be free, and that bicycle parking should be mandated in all buildings on the site, curbside racks, and so forth. So there's a lot more detail. And the important thing that you understand is that way back then, that's 4 years ago, and even back in 2003, which was the original Unity plan, there were better ideas. There were better visions, community visions for the future of the site.